I've read this and I think it's actually something real good.
Sure.
I commissioned completed primary. We'll start flying. Damn, I don't know how to
I
do
feel
that.
like you had. Can everybody in the chat just appreciate the fact that Mover has put zero prep into this email that
No,
he's.
I'm reaching out because despite doing well, all right, so it's the Navy. It's API and primary. I have developed some anxiety in the plane that's become stronger. My friend said he saw one of your YouTube videos where you talked about it, how it affected you, how you pushed through. I think you made that video private. Well, that's for a whole nother story. But I was wondering if I could view it. No, because of the whole other story.
Yeah.
I'm working with a flight surgeon. Command is being understanding. They don't know the details. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to answer this question. Anxiety is, I mean, there's many different definitions of anxiety, where you call it anxiety, where you call it apprehension, whatever you call it. It's one of those things that people who have never experienced it, it's very hard for them to understand, right? Because your best weapon is your mind, and your worst enemy can be your mind too. And once it becomes your worst enemy, it is very, very, very difficult to overcome. But that's not to say it is impossible to overcome.
Correct.
The things that have helped me when I'm feeling like, hey, I don't want to be here, because that's really what it boils down to is, you've got some sense of fight or flight. You don't want to be in that situation. Is focus on what's next. Focus on what you're doing currently. Be in the moment. Because for me, the time that it happened, because it was one big event, the time that it happened, it was a desync. And I talked about it when I reviewed the Michael Fassbender thing, because he talks about it too. Something happens, and suddenly your mind no longer thinks that you and the aircraft are one. That you no longer believe that you are part of one single. Right. You've become a prisoner in this situation.
Correct.
And so the way out of it in any situation, because what the problem with stuff like this is that it manifests in other places. Once it happens the first time, then you start worrying that it'll happen anywhere else. And that becomes a vicious cycle. So to break the cycle, you have to put yourself in situations that are not going to be comfortable, but then you have to use the tools that a counselor will give you or that you have developed that will work. Some things that can help, and I'm not, licensed. I'm not, this is not advice, medical advice. This is
you're a
just
pilot though, so.
Right, we know everything. Stayed in a Holiday Inn.
Yep.
Grossman's book on combat, he talks about combat breathing. That's a very good technique. I used that the other day, not me personally, but I taught somebody who was suicidal. I was taking them to the hospital, and they were freaking out in the back of the patrol car. And I said, look, your best chance of getting the help you need is to show up calm, because the issue that this person was having is they were afraid nobody would believe them that they weren't actually suicidal. And I said,
sure.
Well, you got to calm down first. Like, that's a thing. And the way we got calm was, let's practice our combat breathing. And it's like, what's that? So it is square breathing. So 3 to 4 seconds inhale, hold 3 to 4 seconds, 3 to 4 seconds exhale, hold 3 to 4 seconds. It's a square. And you just repeat that.
Correct.
That's one technique. Another technique is tactile. You feel your hands, you wiggle your fingers, you wiggle your toes, you press the back of your palm. Just something to get your mind, because you've got that heightened response. That's what this is. You're getting that cortisol spike, and what you need to do is come back to a normal level. Music, that helped me a lot. I had songs that would get stuck in my head, and I would hum them to myself or sing them to myself, and the lyrics would be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm cool, I can do this. And eventually, if you do this enough times, it'll go away, because you're too busy to be anxious or fearful. Like, it is a process. It is not something that happens, one day you're not good, one day you're good. It is something that eventually, over time, you'll get better. Wombat, what do you got on this?
So you and I have talked about this offline. I dealt with a lot of things in flight school because of the air sickness, right, and all that stuff. And some people may define it turned into anxiety because I'm second guessing myself. When am I going to get sick? All that. I agree 100% with everything you said. Aviation, I think, has one huge benefit, is that you work with the checklist.
Yeah.
So checklist is always great. Whenever I was feeling this way later on in my career, I'd redo checklists.
Yeah.
Sitting on a catapult and in a Hornet, I'd be like, and I've actually even mentioned that in some of the writing, where it's like, I need to go through all my checklists again, just to make sure, just to convince my brain that I'm in control of this situation, right?
Yeah.
One of the best tricks, and I've never brought this up on your channel or any other channel, and it's stupid, but it worked for me.
If
And
it works, it's not stupid.
It was given to me by a T45 instructor and LSO of mine, who I literally just ran into about a month ago in the pilot lounge, which was awesome. He was the guy that took me to the boat the first time. And he told me, because he knew I was having some of these issues in the T45 as well, is he goes, when you do your walk around the nose of the, he goes, when nobody's around, plane captain's not around, he goes, you put your hand on the nose of that aircraft and you lean in and you whisper to that plane, I own you today.
Nice.
And I tried it and it worked. And
Mental
every
trick.
time I have pre-flighted an aircraft since that day, that's what I say. If you watch me pre-flight an airliner, which as a captain is extremely rare, so it's got to be above 70 degrees, very low winds, sunny. But if you catch me actually doing it, I will still do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's
Remember Man on
It's
Fire?
all your mind.
Yeah. Remember Man on Fire? The gunshot has no fear. The gunshot has no fear.
Yep.
You just have to convince your brain that it is not time for fight or flight. It is time to get to work.
Correct.
It is time. And that's the desync. You just have to get back into sync. You have to be back one with the aircraft. You know, you have to trust the aircraft. You have to trust the car. You have to trust whatever you're in, whatever situation you're in, you have to get back to a level of trust. But I do recommend talking to a professional and working out whatever issue drove you to this point, because something underlying drove this.
Correct.
Work those issues out. The problem, and we've talked about this before, it's just there's a stigma with labels, you know, calling something, you know, oh, I called it anxiety, you know, oh, now, you know, it's like, well, get to the root cause. You don't have to label it. Just get to the point where you know what brought you to this place and how you can move forward and use the tools available. So
Correct.
that's all. It's I will say it's recoverable. It's manageable.
100%.
It is something that you can push through.
And you're not the only one. And that's probably the biggest thing.
That's the thing is when my incident happened to me, and I talked to Dan, you know, Daniel, when we're talking the Apache stuff, you know, you start finding people and they all have their story. And, you know, they all have, this happened to me because of this. Well, I had this, you know, and every time I did that, when he explained it to me, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly right. That's to a T. And the problem is people just don't talk about it because usually they work through it on their own or whatever. But when it gets to the point where you need help, people are like, well, there's a stigma. I don't want to do that. And it's like, no, wait a minute.
And aviation is notorious for that.
Exactly.
Notorious.
It's not that you're the only one. It's just that a lot of people suffer in silence and either
100%.
figure it out somehow by luck, by chance, or just by grit, or they don't figure it out and they go do something else. I mean, that's the reality. So don't think that just because it's happening to you that you're the only person, because that makes it worse. Because then you think,
100%.
I mean, what's wrong with me? You know, and especially don't read the YouTube comments if you happen to mention it one day, because they will tell you you're the weakest person in the world, which is this.
So what you're telling this student in API is one day when he has his own YouTube channel,
Mondays with API kid, don't
read the comments.
Don't read the comments because they will give you ass cancer. Sorry.
Which is one of the least favorite kinds of
the worst kind of cancer. And it comes through your eyes, so to speak, right through your eyes. Into your...